Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Weirdly Magical podcast. And I am astrologer and writer Louise Eddington, author of Modern Astrology: Harness the Stars to Discover Your Soul's True Purpose. And
I am Jen Duchenne, Akashic healer, numerologist, and metaphysician, creator of the Illuminating Journey Cards.
Cool. Okay, so we are here recording on February the 11th. And we are recording about the energy leading up to and around the full moon that is going to take place on February the 19th at 3:53 p.m. Universal Time. So adjust the times yourself. Timeanddate.com's really good. And the full moon takes place at 0:42. 0 degrees, 42 minutes, Virgo and Pisces, because the moon's in Virgo and the sun is in Pisces. When we look at the astrology, we'll be talking a little bit about some of the things leading up to it, because they're quite significant. But we will be talking about the Uranus Pallas Athena opposition. We've also got Venus, Saturn and Pluto very close together in Capricorn. And what else were we going to talk about? Mercury. Mercury will have just entered his shadow, or be just about to enter the shadow of the first retrograde of the year on the full moon. And Chiron has moved into Pisces on the day before the full moon. So it's quite a busy, active full moon.
Aries.
Into Aries, sorry. Yes, out of Pisces. Into Aries. Just to explain to everybody, Jen might have to correct me a couple of times, because Mercury moved into Pisces yesterday as we record this. And Pisces energy can be very foggy and confusing. And Mercury is exactly squaring my natal Mercury in Sagittarius when we record this. So I keep saying the wrong thing. But I know what I mean.
Hey, somebody knows what you mean. That's
good. And interestingly, that degree where Mercury was yesterday as we record this is occupied by the sun on the full moon. So, I think as we record this, we are about to have a big meetup of Mars and Uranus at 29 degrees of Aries. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that as well, and all the other things leading up to it. So, Jen, why don't you kick off?
So here we have a 0 degree moon again, which is the fourth of 5 0 degree moons. And of course, the 0 is the rebirth energy, that 0 point of new beginnings. So there's that expansion, and we know we're being drawn into a place of new beginnings. Like we're starting over, we're washing off the old with Chiron moving into Aries. That's a great indicator. And then, of course, pretty soon we'll be having Uranus moving into Taurus. So these are major points that are telling us there's a huge foundational movement happening. So it's re-echoed by the 0 degrees. It's 42 minutes, which is pretty interesting because that's a 6. And what's interesting is because this is happening on a 19-day. Now we're in a 19 calendar year, and that's a 1. 19 is the energy of the sun. It's about shining our light out into the world. And so it also reduces to a 1, 19. It's about endings and new beginnings. So again, we're having more energy about new beginnings. And that 19 with that, it's a very strong energy of allowing us to find ourselves with the 1. And it's a double 19 because we have the one from the year, and of course the day of the full moon. This is not a split date. Sometimes the full moon is split on different days depending where you are in the year, in the world, in the year. But it's not.
Australia might be.
What's that?
Australia might be.
Maybe Australia.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't really pay attention. Well, sorry, people who from Australia, but it's hard to pay attention to all these zones.
It really
Yes, maybe it's split for you, but then it's always split because you're ahead of us.
Yeah.
But for this part of the northern hemisphere, it's all seems to be. I better not say that because I don't know. But what's interesting about it is the 6 minutes with the one that we have from the 19 day. 1 plus 9 is 10, and that's of course is a 1. So we have all that divine energy flowing in with the 0. That's 6. We're actually having a 6 universal day. So there's a double 6 going on here too. So it's an exciting, abundant kind of energy. And this 15, it's a 15 day because we have a 14 universal month, is something that connects us to divine energy, to our divine mission, to what we're here to do, to be in joy. So it's very expressive of this idea of coming through the canal, and the fact that we're having this moon between Virgo, which is about the body or our daily habits, and Pisces, which is watery and the depth, and we're born from water and things are born out of water. I find it quite fascinating that it's this energy happening here with all of this sparking new life and forcing us through the birthing channel, having to let go of a lot of things that we have considered important, the kind of shape of who we've been, that it's been based on people's ideas, like you're supposed to do it like this, and now we're in this revolutionary period.
I kind of always think of the Virgo full moon as being, you mentioned the word already, the purification one as well, and the fact it is at the 0, so it's the full of possibilities. And I always think of it that way because it's the practical mystic, and it's the purging. Virgo's also about cleaning out, purging, cleansing. Pisces is watery and washes away kind of thing. So it is a very much a new start. And I think coming on the back of, we've got this Mars Uranus conjunction that's happening basically on tomorrow for us here in the US, the 12th, 13th, no, depending where you are. And that is followed by not only do we have this one, we always have Mars opposing Pallas right away, Pallas Athena in Libra at 29 degrees. And then Uranus goes on to oppose Pallas Athena. And Pallas Athena, she's so interesting. And the fact that all this is happening leading up to this beginning, she is wise justice. She is, she's prepared to go into war if it's required. She's not just kind of a warrior for the sake of it. She'll do it to bring justice into the world. And she's really, really important over the next few weeks of this 2019, constantly opposing Aries things, and also squaring the moon's nodes and squaring Pluto over there in Capricorn, and Saturn will be joining. We've got this cardinal grand cross building. And all this emphasis on cardinal signs is initiating its new beginnings. So here we have all these full moons at 0s as well, which are the 1st degree, and bringing these new starts, and which also means endings, of course. But we also have the cardinal grand cross or square, whichever you want to call it, bringing this big push to the north node in Cancer. which is more about validation of emotion and feelings. It's about family, remembering we're all family. It's about finding your safety. Jen and I have talked about all of that before. And then, of course, we've got Chiron at 0 degrees as well on the full moon. But as we record, he's at that 29th degree. So we're getting this big shift from all these last degrees, the anaretic degrees of signs, to the first degree of signs, which it means major shifts. And this full moon is a mutable full moon, so it is a changing full moon, because Pisces and Virgo are mutable signs. So there's a lot of change coming. Some of it's quite disruptive. You know, we've got Saturn and Venus having their conjunction on February the 18th, so the day before the full moon, and in the sign of the Patriarchy at 16 degrees of Capricorn. And, you know, there's so much kind of energy here about, well, I'm going to say it, I'm going to swear, but I should give an over 18 rating for our podcast. But the patriarchy is fucked, basically.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, sorry.
That brings us to Regulus. Jen and I were talking about Regulus before, so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about
Oh,
that.
sure. Yeah. So Regulus, which is called the Kingmaker or Kingbreaker, this is this energy that's at right now 0 degrees of Virgo. So it's right on this moon. So it creates a kind of an eclipse in a way, because there's this energy being pushed forward to support the female. Now we have to remember that 0 is actually, if you think about it, embryonic. It's the beginning, it's the start, it's the pool of everything, nothing, and everything. So it's before things begin, and that's female energy, right? So through the 0, through this breath, the holy breath of the 0, this divine energy, comes this this force that is supporting change. And I think it's interesting to note that with this idea that, you know, it awakens a sense of leadership, because Regulus is about leadership. So if you're in integrity, if you're in that place of being in wholeness, which is where we're going, then you're more likely to be to receive a blessing from Regulus. And if you're opposing or trying to force people to do things, or force situations so that you can say, I'm in charge, then you're going to get the brush of pushed away. You're going to be pushed down by Regulus, because the wholeness, that the holiness or the divine essence or source or whoever you're talking to or think about, whatever that is to you, that comes from the 0 energy. And so when you recognize that you're not in charge of the universe, you're here to be a part of the universe and experience life, but you're not here to dictate or play God about other people's lives. So I think this is going to be really interesting. It's also supporting, because Virgo is the female sign, it is you know, ruled by Mercury, right? So it's about this energy of the voice. I find this fascinating. We're in a 14 month right now, which is the number of the scribe, which is all about speaking our truth or describing how we feel, and exploring the idea of how we speak and how we think and what we say and what we give credence to. So it's like our minds are being blown apart, and we've talked about this quite a few times, Lou and I, in these podcasts. But here's this energy of our minds being blown open by the idea that females or female energy is important right now. It's important because it's been suppressed, and you know, even if you're male, the instinctual side, the connection to the divine has been suppressed, or it's been channeled through somebody else saying, I know what God's saying, right? And so now we have to open. It's kind of like our mouths are open, our brains are open, all the stuff coming through, our hearts are open, and we're getting this charge, like an electric charge, pushing us into this new birth, this new idea, which I think is, so it's all related, right? Our voices and what we think and how we say and what we believe. Like if we believe that we have the power to change the regime, which we're being guided through, and the regime is changing, then we have more hope, and we do have to work at it. Like you were saying, this idea of Pallas Athena has that part of her where she's wise, but she's willing to commit to what it takes. And this is really important, because as we are willing to commit to what we take and how we use our voice, like instead of being angry, I mean, it's not like we can't be angry, that we can't use that energy to bring change about and fresh new ideas. But when we use our energy in a force, like we're angry at other people and we're yelling and shouting, or we're being meek and mild, either of those, we're actually abusing that energy of speech, or that energy that runs through us from Mercury and even Uranus, right? The higher energy. It's like we're trying to control it by bending its will and saying, I'm going to yell, or I'm going to be, I'll be the little mouse. And neither one of those is very effective when you're thinking about becoming a queen or a king or whatever it is in your life, and having a greater impact in the world for the greater good, right? Changing how we live.
So while Jeb was talking, I just I wanted to kind of reference my words about the patriarchy is fucked, basically. And the reason it came to mind, and I had to look it up to be able to explain it quickly, properly. There's a belief. It was said that when Regulus moved into Virgo, which was 2011, and this is the first full moon that's right on Regulus, I believe, since then, that it would herald 2,000 years of female dominance, which is about the length of time that Regulus is in Virgo. And there was a story that there was the appearance of the Virgin Mary to the children of Fatima. It was said that she deposited 3 letters to be opened at different time intervals to be read by the reigning Pope, containing messages for the human race. It was said that when the Pope opened the last one, he fainted and never revealed the contents to the world. But I'm not going to try and read the Latin, but the actual rough translation of that final letter from the Virgin Mary was, Regulus is in Virgo, so move over, boys, the patriarchy is fucked. So this is where that came from. So to my mind, it just is saying that, we've been seeing since Regulus moved into Virgo in 2011, and we've had the Uranus-Pluto square, which really ends finally when Uranus moves into Taurus on March the 5th, because that's when they're not in the right signs to be in square, Uranus and Pluto. And then Pluto is going to move into Aquarius. All these things are chips in the system of the patriarchy. Again, nothing to do with men. I had to repeat that this morning already. I know it's not all men.
Well, yes, exactly. Have to remember, it's so interesting. If you think about it, 2,000 years ago or 2,020 years ago, right? That was kind of the movement of Christ. That was the beginning of the kind of rule of the male, or the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy. We say male because it's dominated by the idea of a masculine energy of doing and controlling people through fear. That's what this is about. All of us have masculine and feminine in us, so we're open to each. And now the tap basically is open, so all this female energy is kind of pouring into all of us, male and female. So
Absolutely. And, you know, all the discoveries of all these dwarf planets and these asteroids being used more, they are more female energy, so to speak, because the divine feminine has been missing for the last.
well, absolutely. And one of the things that people say that I find really interesting, I think this is proved scientifically, but I'm not sure, um, that the use of plastic. Now, it's interesting. We're in this time where we have all this plastic. We say, oh, plastic is terrible, which I agree.
Mhm.
But what they say is the use of plastic has actually changed the genetics of males,
Mhm.
right? So males are becoming softer or more feminine because of plastic. So it's kind of ironic, right? Because in a male-dominated world, you know, and again, male meaning from the kind of the pushing energy of making things happen. Um, that's about, oh, let's get the cheapest and let's, you know, let's deny nature, which is very
Control it.
let's control it, let's rape it, let's take what it
Yeah.
has and abuse it so we can make more money. And all of those are very much kind of dominant energies of control, whereas female energies tend to be more about being open, listening to your intuition, coming from that place, what they call inspired action. When you get the feeling, when the timing, it's divine timing, when you know it's the right time to do something, you do it. And from that place of knowing the universe is in charge, right? There's kind of a hands off, even though you're uh, riding the wave or you're riding your own, steering your own boat, there's still a sense of, I'm doing this, I'm enjoying it, I'm feeling the freedom, the adventure, but I don't need to make it into something, right? I don't need to make sure I've got these little slaves that serve me. I think it's.
I do find it very interesting talking about all this male female stuff, that Venus, which apart from the moon, until fairly recently and in traditional astrology, um, was really the only female or feminine energy that was used in astrology. And here she is, sandwiched between Saturn and Pluto in the chart of the full moon, right in the heart of the sign of the patriarchy. Again, Capricorn has its amazing qualities too. And, you know, again, the system of the patriarchy has forgotten that the symbol of Capricorn is the sea goat, which has a fish's tail. So it has this, and it is a feminine sign, but it's been created on these very masculine rules of control and dominance. That's how it's been used for the past couple of thousand years, basically.
Yes, yes, or
And
longer,
yeah,
since the
longer.
Iron Age. So
Yeah,
since there've been weapons to kind of control women, right?
yeah.
There's been control the weakness in people.
Hmm.
What's
And the earth.
right? The idea that you have to dominate somebody by having a weapon, whether it's your voice or your hands or
Hmm.
something, you know, a gun. So it's fascinating that we're having all this energy of people wanting to pull back, right? The patriarchy trying to take it all back, hold it, make sure everyone keeps quiet, silencing people, stopping people from speaking out, doing whatever they can to control it. And, you know, uh, you can't control it forever. And this is
Yeah.
what's coming through, is this energy that, as well, you know, the idea that here Venus is in between those two powerful forces of change, and remembering that Saturn and Capricorn is about what we're here to do, right? Our divine mission. So it doesn't matter, you know, for the past, whatever, few thousand years, it's been about doing it the male way, right? And
Mhm.
now it's going to be about doing it the female way, or finding that balance. We're actually looking to find the balance where each of us is balanced. And so there's a sense of connection, right?
Yeah.
Like we can work together or we can work apart. And here we have Saturn at 16 degrees, which is That's the tower in the tower. It's the turning around of power, right?
Mm.
Everything's going to revolve. Those that have been in charge will be moved to the bottom because that's the revolving of how life is.
Mhm.
People who've been at the top need to fall so others start to come up. And we can see that happening right out in the world. Uh, so it's pretty fascinating. Venus at 18. So this is like the letting go of the ego, because there is an egoic energy around the idea of being the weaker sex, or female, or whatever we want to say. It's like, oh, I can't help what's happening because this is the way it is. There's a very egoic energy there, like, I can't control it, people are abusing me, this is how it is. And that, of course, is all bullshit. That's all ideas in our mind that have to dissolve, because we've lived under that oppression of that idea. And
I need a big, strong man to look after me.
yes, exactly, right? Or I better not, what's the word? I better not contradict someone. It's like, I find it interesting that there's a lot of these dyed blonde women. I mean, if you want to dye your hair, but definitely there must be some effect. There's so many of these fake dyed women that are all about the patriarchy and upholding the patriarchy. And I don't get it. Like, what's the story here? Like, what is it? But again, that's an egoic energy. That's what makes me important, because if I hold up a powerful man, then I'll get the kind of, the kudos for it.
Yeah.
So there's all that energy around controlling other women so that, I can be in power under a man. But what the hell? I was going to say what the fuck, so I can say it because
I said it already. Yeah.
exactly. Freedom. But I mean, why do we have to have that rule? We've got to ask these questions. I'm not just saying it because I want to throw it out there, but it really is. These are questions we need to be asking. Why are we so fixated on this idea that it has to look a certain way? Because we're in this ground shaking time where everything needs to change, and it changes through question. It changes through not being afraid of saying you're sorry, or not falling for put downs. When somebody puts you down, instead of just being quiet and, oh, I can't argue with that, just going, you know what, I'm entitled to feel what I feel. I'm not going to apologize for how I feel. This is very important. I think we need to apologize when we do terrible things, or we've been caught out. But that's the feminine. This is the feminine. We go, I'm really sorry, I did this, I was a total idiot, or whatever. Let's move forward, and I'll prove to you I'm not that person anymore.
Whereas
what's wrong
previously
with
we've apologized basically for breathing.
that? That's right. Or apologizing. Like, I think also this idea of being shamed, right? Like, because in the eyes of society, we did something. Look, we all have done things. Like, some of us have done worse things than others. But the truth is, we all do shitty things. So we have to be able to go, you're right, I did it.
Yeah.
And I apologize. Like, what's the big deal? I don't get it. I don't know why that's so hard for people.
So I did want to talk a little bit more about kind of the revolutionary quality of this full moon, because of what's going on around it. I didn't actually realize till just that Pallas Athena actually turns retrograde on February the 18th. So virtually just 24 hours before the full moon. And as I've mentioned before, she's opposing Uranus. And then when she will go retrograde, she will oppose Eris twice and go back and come forward to oppose Eris again. She will square those nodes, square Pluto, square Saturn. She's really important. I did actually listen to a webinar by another astrologer whose name has escaped me, and he did a whole article on it. And it's kind of funny because we had both done a webinar near Christmas looking at the year to come, and I had talked about Eris squaring the nodes, and he talked about Pallas Athena squaring the nodes, and here they are actually coming together. But this is something, and it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and I'm still investigating. But in my search, another of Pallas Athena's kind of representations is that she was the goddess of truth. Okay. And her symbol is kind of like the Venus symbol, but it's a square or a diamond on top rather than a circle. And it looks somewhat like a spear. And and I found this thing that was saying Greek mythology considered Athena to be goddess of wisdom, arts, industry, justice, and skill. In the Greek myths, her symbols have been the spear, an owl, and the olive branch. All, if you think about the symbolism of those, the spear of truth symbol of Athena was used by a secret society of seekers of truth in England, of which Francis Bacon was a member, and there's a whole swathe of people, and I don't necessarily buy into this, but I love the symbolism of it, believe that he was actually the writer of all the Shakespearean plays, Francis Bacon. He used the pseudonym Shakespeare to shake the spear of truth at what was really going on. And then we add in Eris at the other end, who's coming up as well. She is kind of the revealer of artifice. She's ripping down the white picket fence of what's happening in our societies. Even with our dearest president we have now, he's revealing a lot of what's wrong, whether you agree with him or not. His very presence is revealing a lot of what's wrong with our governments and our societies. So my point to all that was that, the table is really being shaken. Pluto's in Capricorn, kind of digging up what's no longer working. It's digging up the shit and the kind of corruption and the dirty stuff, the murky stuff. That's what Pluto does. He's digging up how our institutions are really just all corrupt and nasty. And then here we have Pallas Athena over there and in Libra, and Eris in Aries, kind of really shaking the table and shaking it up. And the fact that Pallas Athena is opposing Uranus and stationary basically on this full moon, I would not be surprised, because they're both at that last degree as well, that highly pressured last degree of the signs. I would not be surprised if between now on this recording, February the 11th and February the 19th, something major comes out that kind of shocks people out of complacency.
Oh, definitely. I find it fascinating that sorry, ping.
Okay, I know those bing.
To say that you are right? That's a message from the universe. Because the thing here that's so interesting is, okay, here's Pallas Athena. So she's a major player. We have the major female players all situated to bring wisdom by any means necessary, because we have to think these are all the wisdom keepers, like the female energy that has been part of our cultures all around the world for centuries and have held these wisdoms. And here they are poised for whatever needs to come through. This flood of, I get this this kind of image of like sewage, right? It's just a flood of sewage that needs to just kind of force its way through. And that's the thing, is to remember that the sewage is coming through, and that it's clearing out the air, but it's not going to, it's something that needs to happen, but it's not going to kind of damage what's coming. And so we can't be afraid of it. It's interesting that Pallas Athena is in Libra, of course, which is the scale, this idea of being in balance, or looking at both sides and what needs adjusting. At that 29, like you said, that final degree, 29, that's amazing, a double 11. right? This portal, this doorway that's allowing us to enter something new, more new beginnings. Of course, Eris set that to 23 degree, which is the most powerful degree we have. The
Mm-hmm.
royal lion, this is about courage. We need to have courage. I think a lot of this is to do with having courage of our convictions, not letting the belief or disgust or the whatever it is about people,
Mm-hmm.
people in the patriarchy that have a certain opinion about us, is not letting that control what we choose to do. So we can't kind of stand back and go, oh, I'm going to be in trouble. We have to go forward. And with Pluto, you were talking about Pluto, and I didn't talk about the degree of Pluto. This is interesting because, of course, Pluto is kind of caught up between them, right? In a sense, right? They're kind of in the
Yeah.
middle of the
Yeah.
two. And it's the shit stirrer. So this is the one that's making that surge come through at 22 degrees, which is I see that as a female number, but it's about balance, right? It's a master number. Again, you have that energy of bringing balance or designing. Like if you want to create a new foundation or new era, you're going to have to clean out all the old stuff to begin fresh. So that's an exciting energy there. And
Yeah.
also the idea of having Venus there between Saturn and Pluto is she's ready to get her hands dirty, get in the muck and go, what do we need to do? This is a 9, a 1 and 8, it's a 9. It's about finding that compassion, finding looking at our relationships through the eyes of love and compassion and practicality,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Practicality of what Saturn brings and the kind of shit stirring that Pluto brings. Like, what are we bringing into it? What are we letting go of? So we don't have to be consumed by illusion anymore, right? The idea that, oh, it's supposed to look a certain way. When you're thinking about new beginnings, when you're thinking about these female energies that are willing to do kind of crazy things, right? Like Eris or whatever, throwing in that, the Trojan horse. We kind of have to do those things to shift the energy. We have to break the structure that we're living in. I find it.
Shock out
What's
of
that?
and shock out of complacency, as I.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes energy, it takes work, and this flushing out of everything, of all the shit, is going to help us. But we also have to help ourselves, right? We have to voice and act differently in order to make use of this very exciting energy that's in motion.
And then, we kind of haven't talked yet about the Mercury-Neptune conjunction, because the sun is in Pisces. This is a full moon, as I said. And we also have Vesta at 9 degrees of Pisces. Venus was at 18, which is a 9 as well. So I'll let Jen talk about that in a minute. But then we have Mercury and Neptune conjunct, with Mercury just entering the shadow of the first retrograde. And guess where Mercury will turn retrograde? At the 29th degree of Pisces. So at 29 degree is going to be triggered again. So, but to my mind, what this is adding into all of this, with the moon being kind of on her own in Virgo, opposing the sun and opposing all this Piscean energy, really is that we're getting this big influx from spirit, or the mystery, or the muse, and Neptune rules Pisces and is at its most creative, its most mystical, but it's most connected with the cosmic soup, if you like, the collective unconscious, whatever you want to call it. It is, for those of us that are a little, or more than a little, connected to whatever the other is, or whatever is around us, I think there's going to be a lot of information, also called downloads, coming in. you know, I think it's an overused term at times, but I think there's going to be a lot of downloads coming in on this one. And that Vesta, she's focus and commitment, and she's the keeper of the flame. You know, Vesta was this goddess who kept the flame of the empire burning, if you like. And when the flame went out, the empire was going to collapse. Well, the flame's being a bit doused in Pisces, I think. So yet it's another indicator.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, right, that this, when you think about it, I know we talked about last year, it was a lot of this water and fire, right? How initiation begins in water. And that's where Vesta is, right? She's the flame is being rekindled because this is like all the goddesses or energies, whatever you planets that are kind of female based, uh, and they're being supported by the male counterparts as well. But they're all in place. They're in position to kind of fire start us into this new age and kind of sweep aside obstacles. I feel like this is interesting that, okay, with Vesta and with Venus at the 9 degree, because the 9 degree is about unconditional love. It's about stepping into the truth of who we are, to showcase our brilliance, you know, not be, it's an emotional number, but it's not about being attached to our ego or how people think of us. It's more about bringing out our brilliance and playing that fine role of who we are, and recognizing that, you know, we are all one. There is this compassionate, forgiving, understanding energy that is allowing us to light the flame and to do these tough things that are needed and to allow the ship to flow through. And I'm also finding it interesting that Mercury is at 16 degrees, right, on this full moon. And 16 is that tower number. It's that number of high intuition. We're going to, and of course, being in Neptune, the intuition is going to be off the charts, right? We're getting great hits, but we have to make sure that we're not focusing on the wrong thing, because there's a lot of obfuscation, right? A lot of obscurity happening here around this moon and around these and around our knowledge or learning. Sometimes that's good, because when we go into that place where we don't know what's happening, we have to follow our instincts. We have to give up trying to control things through thinking it through and allow ourselves to be led. Like if we're getting a hit, like something isn't quite right, then we need to trust that. Something about this thing or what people are saying doesn't make sense. Trust that. And you know, there's that energy of Neptune. I keep getting this picture of Neptune, kind of, you know, he was one of the ancient you know, leaders, right? This idea of riding through the water and controlling everyone through water, and his, you know, his great chariot. And it's kind of that energy of, like, even for the gods or whatever we call them, there's this excitement of something new. Yay, we're all getting up into battle and we're going to kind of reset, and we're using strategy, right? We're strategizing how we're going to bring in that Trojan horse, how we're going to kind of send these fire bombs of wisdom into people so they stop being so frozen and automatic, right? All of this is happening, and on the level of the planets and on the universe, it's a lot of movement that's exciting and different. It's allowing us to kind of, our imagination is just being exploded and expanded, like we are sinking into this kind of greater, vaster wisdom and being able to think about things and come into alignment with things we've never imagined. And now we're imagining it. And not only are we imagining it, we're actually activating it. Because once the 0 degree and the 15 degree moons stop, this is kind of, we're going to start rolling forward in a different way, because we're setting up a whole new idea about who we are and what's important to us. People in our lives, how we look at our relationships, how we look at our jobs, our
Yeah,
values. We're realigning all our values here.
completely. And then, of course, Chiron moving into Aries, not Pisces, right before as well. And, there's a lot being said about Chiron in Aries. He last moved in, it would have been about 51 years ago. So we could look back at that, but I was 8. And that's, of course, there was an awful lot of 68, wasn't that the bad year with all the assassinations
Oh
and
yeah, it was like war, contra, what was it?
well, and it was, and wasn't that JFK and all that kind of
Oh
stuff,
yes,
and,
that's right. And there
Robert
was,
Kennedy and Martin Luther King and all those things. I'm not saying the same's going to happen again, but Chiron has this maverick energy. And moving into Aries, he is talking about, he's the shaman. He's talking about our identity, because Aries is very much the toddler, the I am, this very elemental I am energy. If we look back to those 60s when Chiron last moved in there, that was when we had, I've mentioned the Uranus-Pluto square already, but Uranus and Pluto were conjunct back then. And so we've got all these echoes, but we're kind of reaching another point because we've learned some things from then, hopefully. And we're going to go in and saying, well, we didn't bring the change we wanted to bring, perhaps let's try again, kind of thing, and approach from a different direction. And interestingly, if we look back then, we were very much still relying on kind of the patriarchal kind of setups and things, which is being dissolved now, and we're not now.
absolutely. And I think also, the other side of the 60s, if I think about the 60s, 68, to me, there was a lot of music and exploration and
Free
hippie.
love.
But if I look at Uranus and Chiron moving, to me, this is more a rebalancing. It's like all the things that have been out of balance that we've kind of bounced against are now beginning to be resolved, right? So there's a new kind of resolve. And like you were saying, this idea like that stuff didn't work. I mean, what it did is it actually did work, just not for in the way we would interpret it, but that was planned as everything is.
Yeah.
But it really pulled us into an age where we started to shift things. So many things have shifted since that time. That's really key. One of the things that I find really fascinating is this Jeff Bezos thing that happened.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
That, to me, that is so key to this month and key to this year. And he is definitely, the richest man in the world. This is very a Chiron Uranus thing, richest man in the world. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they call him, the richest man in the world. Decided to defy the system, right? Because that's how normally people just, let's just sweep it under the carpet. We'll just be quiet. We're just going to pay it off. We'll say this. And he is a major player in this, deciding to expose himself before other people expose him.
Yeah.
And not just expose himself, but to expose the culture of what's happening. So that helps to dismantle it, right? Those things are starting to fall apart. There's a lot of those bigger corporations that are falling apart, like, and so it's so interesting, right? Here we have somebody who is doing amazing things. Like, he's already done amazing things with Amazon and bringing in new ideas. A lot of people may not like him or whatever, but this isn't about that. It's not about the personality. It's about being a change maker, an innovator. We're looking at these people who are innovating things because they have the power, right? He has the power to do that because
it's kind of interesting. He's getting divorced at the same time, and basically he and his wife set up Amazon together. And so
yes.
how is that going to be split? Because it seems fairly amicable, their divorce.
I'm sure it's
Yeah,
amicable.
so how is that going to change things as well with the, the masculine, the feminine as well? So not only is he challenging the National Enquirer and all that stuff, he's kind of a bit of a key player at the moment, as you say, and
Yes,
in many
yes,
respects.
major player. We have to remember also that we just had the Davos meeting in the end of January, and Davos is the when the richest people in the world, the greatest influences come together to decide what they're going to focus on.
Mm,
And a few weeks later, we have this thing happening with Jeff Bezos. We're kind of spiraling off that,
mm,
which indicates to me that even people at the top of the food chain are starting to look at things differently. Now, a
mm,
lot of those people do give to charity and do want to make a difference, but there's a shift. There's a shift. Like they're breaking away from being in bed with politicians
mm.
or that way of doing that under kind of hiding what they're doing, right?
It's definitely being shown up. I don't know if you saw I shared a video on Facebook of a panel at Davos
Oh
where
no, I
a guy, I think he was from Sweden, but anyway, he was a historian and everything anyway. And he was basically saying, I've been here at this Davos thing for all this time, and all I hear you talking about is kind of charity and, doing good works, which is fabulous. Nobody's talking about taxes, he said. And there was this old white guy in the audience who had been CEO of some company, I can't remember what it was, and he was clearly really upset about the idea of having to pay taxes. But my point is, these ideas are being brought to the fore again, and people are kind of infiltrating that little closed boys club and saying, well, this is all well and good, but how about doing it this way, kind of thing. So anyway.
That's right. It's the challenges and the infiltrators and these kind of different things are very interesting. I mean, even Cortez,
Yeah.
right? She come up with this plan of taxing the rich. I think it's also part of the rebalancing, right?
Yeah, it is.
Because talk about charity, that's like you're saying you're here and everyone is there.
Yeah.
Like that's what I don't like about charity. If you want to give, you give freely,
Mm-hmm.
give to someone to make a difference, not to make yourself feel better or like, oh, I can save money by giving charity, right? This is about recognizing we're all equal and some of us are in different positions. Just
Yeah,
doesn't take away from our equality of as beings. It just
exactly.
right. We want to rebalance that so we don't have a few very wealthy and then everyone else is, in
And
this.
sitting there hoping at the bottom of the pile that somebody will be charitable enough to help you.
That's right, right. I mean, we got to move away from that idea of charity because
Yeah.
it's bullshit, right? When you are treating people well and giving people social services,
Hmm.
then you don't need charity, right?
Exactly. And it's I worked hard for my money. That's a very patriarchal thing too. So, are you saying you work more than, I don't know, the plumber who like works 60 hours a week,
Right, or teacher, or hey, a
or
bus
somebody at
driver.
McDonald's even?
That's right. Like
It's just,
people who earn whatever the going rate is work very hard for their money, maybe harder, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Physically harder. Yeah.
So I think I've said all I want to say about the chart for now. Is it time to look at the symbols, do you think, Jen?
Yes, that sounds good. I did pull a card. I can talk
Oh,
about it for
yes,
a
let's do
minute.
the card first.
Pull
Yeah.
a card. So the card is the 30,
Oh, I haven't seen that card before.
which is it's all white, this card. And what's interesting about it is the central figure is in the middle under a hut, for those of you who can't see. It's a very pale card, but there's this amazing hut in the middle, and there's this figure in the middle with this ball and uh, these dust brush, whatever that's called, dust brush.
Dust devils?
Yeah, that's it.
The ones that blow across the road, anyway.
Exactly, exactly. But there's this figure with this pure circle, basically. So it's at the beginning, it's the beginning of creativity. This is a time to be in peace with yourself in a kind of completely non-colored environment that allows you to recreate from the beginning. I think
Is that
there's
a
a little
spaceship in the background?
spaceship in the background.
The top, at the top, no, not the bird. To the right of us there, yeah. It looks like a
Yeah, that's kind of like a citadel. It could be a spaceship, right? It's like a citadel above
yeah.
the roof of this open house, and there's a little beaver. I think that's a little beaver there.
If anybody wants to see the card closer, perhaps, we'll tell you where to find us at the end. Perhaps Jen could post a photograph of it on her page or in her group. So
Oh
when
yeah,
when we say where to find us all, go and find Jen, and she could post a photograph of this card, because it's very fascinating, and it is harder to see.
yeah,
And
it's hard.
some of you are just on audio too. So
Yes, exactly. But
yeah.
it's basically this card is being at the point, the 0 point of creativity, which I think is a lot to do with this moon, right?
Yeah.
It's all about being creative from a new place. If you're starting from that place, like I'm in the circle and nothing exists and everything exists, what am I choosing to focus on? What am I choosing to allow? It's a very abundant energy that's in this moon and in this card. That idea that you're available, that everything's available to be created from a new place if you have, just change the way you're dealing with it from a place of integrity and truth. I mean, if you have people around you that suck, move away from them, right? If you're having negative responses, think about changing those responses of these things you can't change, right? If you want to be with your partner, this is a deepening time of love, a lot of love coming through, then find ways to make it work. Instead of focusing on all the shitty things about your partner, focus on what you love about them, what you enjoy about them, what you enjoy about being in a relationship about. Because that is what creativity is, using our imagination to shift how we think and talk about and illustrate our lives. So I
It's
think that's
that operate from joy thing again, isn't it? It's
yes,
you know,
absolutely,
even
absolutely.
if you're cleaning toilets, it's just like, just be in that joyful place. You know?
Remember, if we're all equal and we're all the same in the eyes of the divine, then what we do is not so important, is how we do it. I actually had a client, I think this is kind of interesting, who is very, in past lives, had a lot of kind of religious experiences and very much connected to Christ in the sense of, talk about charity, right? Being of charity to others. And in the reading, the Akashic beings were saying, you have to be like Christ. And Christ wasn't about talking, he was about doing. He was about if you feel compassion and love or whatever, you do the thing. You wash the person's feet, you feed them. You don't go talking and spouting about, oh, if only you could have a different point of view and see it. You show people through your actions so that they begin to feel loved through that. And I think that's quite profound. It really impacted this person, and I've seen them, they doing things through the eye, like they're actually activating actions by thinking about, for them, it's like, what would Christ do? So whatever your thing is, how do you live the experience, not just talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And you could apply that to Chiron, because Chiron in through Pisces, I've often talked about as the true Christ consciousness.
That's
the,
true.
the the true energy of Christ, whether you believe he was real or whatever you believe, it doesn't matter. The energy of the Christ is a real thing, and I know. And moving into Aries the day before this new moon, you could say this Aries is about action, taking action, doing.
Right, and it's about how you see yourself in the world with
Yeah,
Aries. Right? It's
yeah.
so how you appear in the world. So you want to act to show you really are who you are, right? It's not the things people have told you you are, but it is the truth of who you are. And that's the beauty of Chiron moving into Aries too, right? I think that was a great point, right? The Christ consciousness, it is a real thing. It's an energy
Yeah.
that has existed since the beginning of time. And it is what wakes us up, because we do change the world by doing. I
Hmm.
mean, we're not going to change it just by sitting on the sidelines giving advice.
No.
As
And I have
good
to
as
tell
that
you,
may feel.
I have to,
Sorry.
I have to tell you that Jesus is my shamanic gatekeeper. He lives in a cave on an asteroid, and he approves of this. He says, because he thinks everybody got it wrong all the time. A shamanic gatekeeper, for anybody that's listening, is kind of your protection. It's like if I feel like I need some kind of energetic protection and things, I can call in my gatekeeper to help. So it has
That's
nothing
great.
to do with religion.
Yeah, nothing to do with religion. And remember, this is the whole point of all of this is we're breaking away from organized religion or these, because if you think that, I mean, if we look at the books like the Bible and all of these things, they're teachings that are not meant to be taken literally. They are ideas and they are impregnated with the opinions of the people that wrote it, right?
Oh, yes.
And that's the point, right? As well as being interpreted by people that are impregnated of wanting a certain, uh, they want you to think a certain way. In fact, I posted a funny thing about Iceland has declared
Oh,
that,
I posted
yeah,
that too. Yes.
yeah, Iceland has declared that the Bible
Warning label.
a warning label. Well, and it makes total sense, right? Because if you start believing that all of that is true and this is how it, you can't take it literally. It's a story. It's a fable. It's like we're
If we took it
looking at
literally,
the
we'd be stoning women to death still. So,
yeah, and
you know,
if you look at the Christ energy, it isn't about that nine and that the that energy is about
yeah,
living what you believe, right? That means everyone is equal, that uh, everyone is part of the universe and everyone deserves compassion and recognition.
absolutely. And if people want an idea of what what Jesus might have actually been like, you know, it's an opinion still though, because it's written from someone's perspective. But
Opinions.
but there's a whole series of books called the Maeve Chronicles, and he's a very real kind of person in that, and kind of has his foibles and disappointments, and he's not kind of this. Anyway,
Yeah,
yes,
we can't promise. And I think that's a good point, even with Chiron or any of these figures and the danger is that when we put someone on a pedestal, whether
hmm
it's Jesus or anyone, right?
hmm
Human, a living human, then we're saying they're above us.
yeah,
And then we're disappointed when they turn out to have feet of clay. Like we don't want them to have emotions. So basically, what we're saying is, and a lot of people say that about spirituality, which is total bullshit, that we're not supposed to get angry, we're not supposed to have feelings, or we're supposed to be above all that. We're just ordinary people going through learning and trying and testing things out, trying to figure out who we are more and more. And
yeah,
so we don't want to put people on a pedestal. That was the whole point about the Jesus thing, was that he's supposed to be just like everyone else,
yeah,
just a regular guy
with
who
a good
has,
message.
right, exactly, just a regular guy with a message. And hey,
Yeah,
let's do this thing. Let's cut away these old ideas of who we're supposed to be and
yeah.
just swim in this pool figuring it out.
Anyway, let's get to the symbols.
Yes, indeed.
Shall I read the Chandra symbol
Yeah.
first this time? Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so the symbol for the position of the moon on the full moon is a volcano erupting at night, burning through the restrictions of the day, taking on and transmuting the world of ordinary consciousness. Inwardly erupting with all that it leaves out, you become a conduit for the suppressed, the repressed, and the denied facets of self and life, exposing yourself to the onslaught of conventional ideas and their consequences. Aching and longing to turn the world around, you are given to subtle or obvious ways to channel and express what lives inside. You feel intensively committed to bringing it all together within the ordinary compass of everyday life, saturated with deep impressions of what this earth is moving through. You are being given the chance to stand in for that, to bring it, and perhaps even to become it. And that kind of feels to me like all that things we've been talking about, like the sewage and the lava, if you like, from the Pluto kind of inwardly erupting, but to make everything whole, which is Virgo, because Virgo is make things whole unto itself. It's to help. This is what we're moving towards, to kind of let it all erupt and then bring it together to make whole. That's what we're being invited to do anyway. So
that's right. And by those small steps,
yeah,
setting a
yeah.
goal, taking a few small steps, reassessing, and then continuing, right?
I think this one's quite a big step though, with it being on Regulus, but as you said.
Oh yeah, that's a huge step. But we've been primed for this,
Oh
so
yeah.
it's not like we can't handle it. We can, and even though it could be really messy and ugly and stinky, it doesn't matter, right? Because we know, and I mean when I say it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter in the sense that this is just part of the way forward. So we will deal with it, and the more we open up and recognize that that stuff doesn't label us, the easier it will become to create something new with all the support. It's just incredible.
I love the bit about transmuting the world of ordinary consciousness, because that's what's happening.
Yes.
Our consciousness is being shifted and changed. So
Yeah, and we
transmuted.
need to invite it in, right?
Yes,
We
we do.
need to do what we can and ask that question: how can I transmute this experience I'm having to joy? How can I let go of my old stories?
Yeah.
So the Sabian symbol in a portrait, the significant features of a man's head are artistically emphasized. The capacity to picture oneself clearly, the salient features, and the overall meaning of any situation. And the key word is discrimination.
They're very similar in some ways, the symbols.
Yeah, very similar. I think what's interesting about this is just like we're saying that we get to decide what areas of our faces or heads, and our heads are where we think, our heads are where we receive information. So it's a place where we can imagine, but it's also a place where we can get caught up, and we get to decide what is it that we are artistically emphasizing.
And Aries is very associated with the head too. So it's,
Yes.
yes. So yeah.
And of course, that keyword discrimination, I think that speaks to a lot of what we've been talking about, although we may not have used that word. But the idea of when you're in this process, when these things are happening, and you discriminate in terms of what is the right thing for me to do? What's the integrous thing? Do I want to be around these people? Do I want to say these words? Do I want to believe these things? What's my truth? What's an imposed truth that somebody else put on me, right? And why do I need those things?
Fantastic. Okay, Jen, let's go. I'm going to sign off first this time. So I'm Louise Eddington. Find me by Googling my name, Louise Eddington, louiseeddington.com. I have a Patreon, Louise Eddington. I also write almost every day on medium.com, but you can also find that on Patreon. I have a group, the Planetary Magic Cafe, on Facebook. I am everything else. Oh, Louise Eddington Astrologer Facebook page, and my book again. If you don't have my book, Modern Astrology, getting great reviews, going really well. If you have my book, please leave me a review. Oh, and leave us a review, please, for our podcast on your chosen provider, because the more reviews we have, the better.
Exactly, I agree. Leave us reviews. That will much appreciated. So I'm Jen Duchenne. You can find me at jenduchenne.com. I do weekly videos on YouTube using the illuminating journey cards that I have for sale on my website at jenduchenne.com/illuminating journey cards. You can also find me at my free group on Facebook, the Light Club of the Woo-Woo Weirdos of the World. And you can find me on Facebook, Jen Duchenne. I also write, and I don't know, I'm everywhere. You can Google me, find me on Instagram.
Yeah, me too. It's just our names. We're well. But I did want to. One thing I forgot to mention from both of us is Jen and I did a web class on for 2019 that comes with a really detailed PDF as well, and the recording and the PDF are available on both our on Jen's website. Mine's not quite on my website yet, but it is available. If you want the link, just message me and you can get the link. That's available for $30, and it's one of the attendees was like, oh, I did not expect the PDF to be that detailed. So she was quite blown away. She said it's fabulous to have to help her through the year. So okay, so I think that's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.